Welcome back, everyone. This is your host, Jennifer Hobbs, with Celebrate the Struggle, where my mission is to encourage myself and other people to get comfortable with the uncomfortable, to be able to just reflect upon our lives, our struggles, and take a look at how we are amazing. Like, we might be a hot mess and struggling, but we have persevered to this point, made the choices we made to get through it. And so let's give our struggle a little bit of space, acknowledge it, but I realize that it's not going to define our future. So I'm very lucky today to have with me Michael Hood. He is an Army retired veteran, and now he is a veteran peer support specialist and a mental health advocate. So welcome, Michael.
Thank you. Glad I could be here today.
Me too. I love even just like reading that you went from you're a retired veteran and now you're an advocate for veterans. That I knew already that I liked you the minute I read that. I love when people step into the service of giving back. And for those of us that have been through struggle or trauma, like it's nice when you get to the point to like realize that you want to help other people through that now. So tell us and the listeners a little bit about like, where did Michael come from? What's like, how did you get here to this point to where you wanted to be a veteran peer support specialist?
Well, I joined the Mississippi Army National Guard as a senior in high school, and I went to basic training AIT at Fort Sill, Oklahoma, right after graduation as a 13 Bravo cannon cocker. And then in 1989, they sent me to chaplain assistant school to reclass as a chaplain assistant. I deployed with the 112th Military Police Battalion, Mississippi National Guard, in August 1990 to Desert Storm. We were there for 9 months. And then I came back and I transferred to active duty in November of 92. I was reclassed as a cook because of my hearing loss that I had suffered in Desert Storm. So the next 20 years I spent as a cook in the Army. I did three tours to Iraq, one to Afghanistan. And so in April of 2004, right after I got home from my first deployment, I thought I was in Iraq. I was driving down the middle of the highway like we do, dodging IEDs, dodging trash piles, dead animals, everything that we were taught that might be in IED potholes. And so I got home. It was the weekend. I said, okay, this is going to pass by Monday. I'll be okay. But it didn't. So I went to mental health at Fort Hood, where I was stationed. And all of a sudden, red flags went up all around me because my commander wanted to know why a staff sergeant who was going to mental health without telling anybody. I didn't realize there was a protocol. I just thought it was like sick call. You go to mental health, you go to doctor, So, and then I spent the next 8 years on active duty till my retirement in 2012, fighting the system, trying to stay in, and learning things that I could tell other people to help them get through it. Because all of a sudden I was on the other side of the line because now I'm mental health, so I have to be evaluated before every deployment, be evaluated after every deployment. And of course I was going mental health in between. So conversations were pretty constant between my NCOIC, my commander and first sergeant, as they're concerned with me. I told them, look, I said, mental health will never be an out for me. I will never use it as an excuse for not doing my job. I said, I just have changed how my mind works because of the depression and anxiety. So it looks different to me, but it will look the same to you. I said, there will be no change in how I do it. How I think and how I process it is what's going to change. So you won't see anything. And for 8 years, I did my job. I never got recommended for anything, any kind of bad conduct or any kind of unbecoming or anything like that during my last 8 years. And I made 4 deployments. I
Mm-hmm.
even ran the dining facility at Camp Victory in Iraq in 2007 to 2009 was the division-sized dining facility. So, even after a while, I'd convinced my leaders that, hey, I'm going to be okay. But I still had that bear on my back because I knew at any point a commander could recommend and I would be done. And that is just the unfortunately sad case. And so after I retired, I was trying to find my place in veteran world. I volunteered for numerous veteran events, helping people with cooking and stuff, since that was my forte. And then finally, I started getting into peer support, and the really kicker for it was COVID. When everything shut down, I realized that all the veterans had just lost all of their socialization places to go to, VFW,
Mm-hmm.
American Legion, wherever. And all of a sudden, they were alone. They were by themselves at home. So I started my own Facebook page, Help the Veterans Standing in Front of You, which I have now over 25,000 followers. And that was my springboard into peer support. And so now I do it free of charge because I'm 100% disabled, and and I have my retirement pay, which takes care of my financial need for my family. So I do it just to help my veterans. So anytime that people contact me on Facebook or whatever, I'll talk to them about everything. And the first thing that I always tell them, I said, "Are you having mental health problems?" And I use the word every day, 100 times a day. I never call it anything else. Other people want to call it something else, but
Mm-hmm.
to get rid of the stigma, we have to call it what it is.
Mm-hmm. That is, you just nailed it right there with that. Like, we just need to call it what it is. Let's not tiptoe around it. When your story of having to tell them, like, look, my mental health will not affect me, my performance, and hearing about your journey through that, it reminds me of something that I have learned about over the last 6 months, trying to educate myself so that I could best help veterans and their families, or just anyone from struggle. And it reminds me, as I was learning about the different kinds of stigma, one of them is structural, like in the setting of the Army, like where, like, no, like, you're staff sergeant, you can't have mental health issues. And in my opinion, it stinks that you even have to be put in the position to speak the words, hey, like, look, my mental health will not affect my job, because you shouldn't have to say that. And so, as I mentioned, structural stigma, it also reminds me of another term I've heard called sanctuary stigma, where in certain environments that we expect there to be a safe environment, we expect it to be supportive. And that reminds me of sanctuary stigma, like the Army that you signed up for and sacrificed, to give back to the Army and our country, then turning around and not being supportive like that. That stinks. That's like a perfect picture of structural and sanctuary stigma. But that's really, I love that. For me, I also had something like, a life turning moment come from COVID, but I love that it was COVID that made you think and have empathy that, like, wow, all these veterans that had these social places to go to no longer have that. Like, I will be honest, not that I'm proud of it. I mean, bet everyone's just like me, but until you speak that out loud and say that to me, I never thought about that. I got so wrapped up in COVID and all the things of my life that never dawned on me. And holy cow, that's takes away everything for them. Then you're isolated and alone. And so I love that was the moment that your initiative and your passion to want to help and give back to other people. I love that it started there. So you said you started a Facebook group called Help the Veteran Standing in Front of You. I will make sure to put that into the notes of this show so that people will be sure to go check that out. I also am not in that group yet, so I want to go check that out. So my next question for you, first of all, thank you for sharing all that with us and being vulnerable enough to say, that you were dealing with mental health issues and like had to sit there and own that, being in the military. So talking to all these veterans for you and like trying to help advocate for their mental health and being of support to them, I can only imagine that like it also can take a toll on you and certain triggers. And so my question is like, I know you get rewards from that. Like I get spiritual and mental health rewards just from talking to veterans like you. I know you get rewards from it, but I can also see that you have to make sure you take self-care for yourself. And so something that I always ask my guests is, what do you do or try to stay consistent with to keep your spiritual, mental, and physical self to take care of it? What have you seen positive effects from? And so it helps you, and so you try to be consistent with it.
Well, I journal. I purge my thoughts. It's something I've been doing for I don't know how long, probably 20 years now. And it is a lot of, and I don't go back and reread my journal. I just leave it as it is. Whatever I wrote, I wrote. I just get it out so that it's out and we can deal with it. Because a lot of times if we keep things bottled up, we really don't understand the situation. So maybe I was angry at somebody, but it really wasn't angry. I was disappointed in their behavior, and I got angry because I was disappointed. And so now I identified the real emotion. And when you identify the real emotion, you can cope with it. So then I'll I'll take some deep breaths. I love listening to certain songs, so I have like 4 playlists on my phone for each thing that I need to cope with. So I'll just hit the play button. I'll listen to the music for a while, and then I have. Like when I went through anger management, I made statements, wrote down on a card that I carried around, like statement like, I got angry, but I didn't explode. So that's progress, And so it's good to give yourself an attaboy when you go through a difficult situation and get through it and you made a progress from the one episode before. So if you're making good progress, that's when you give yourself rewards, So, and then, I like going fishing, even though weather's changing, I may not catch anything, but I just sit out there, listen to the birds singing, listen to the wind blowing in the trees, and just relax, and then, finally, it's just meditation.
It is.
Used to, I didn't like silence. It used to bug me, but now it may be getting older or something, I don't know. But now I enjoy silence.
I do too.
That is when I feel like that my mind is the clearest and I can really process some of the heavier stuff that I'm dealing with.
Absolutely. It definitely helps to give clarity. I like that you mentioned that. That's cool that you journal. I love to write myself. Actually, right now I'm working, not working, but my publishing company who published my book that I wrote in the past year, they brought me on to lead a veteran writing group. And so that's been amazing as I have started this first one. But I love that you had said you make sure to give yourself an attaboy. Like, I'm glad we're talking about this because another thing, in addition to the listeners hearing stories and being enlightened and hearing about things that they don't know about, and even though it might be a little uncomfortable and like, oh my God, seriously, the Army did that. Like, it's real life and it happens. But I also want people to come on here and give hope to other people that, like, you can persevere. And so, like, by giving them ideas of the different tools or strategies that you use for your own self-care, I like that, we can give them some ideas. So journaling, awesome. And making sure you put in there praise for yourself, attaboy, like that. That brings me to another strategy I really want to tell you and the listeners about because it has helped me, and maybe it'll help somebody listening. Like, when it comes to, it's kind of like your journaling, but it mirrors it a little bit. It's like a to-do list. Instead of expecting yourself to get like, my to-do list looks crazy right now, I try to, and I've kind of gotten out of the habit, if I'm being honest, but at certain times in my life when I am good at it, I'll do a daily, like, here's a list of 3 priority things. I do still do that. And then one thing that 3 and 3. 3 things I need to get done, and 3 things that I did get done or that I did well that day. And so I still somewhat do it as I write down like my daily gratitude. But for anybody that like runs on a to-do list and like is, obsessing about it and then gets down on themselves for not getting enough done, that is a strategy to take away, to either give yourself a moment to journal or give yourself a moment to just write down 3 expectations for the next day, but 3 things that you did well or accomplished for the day. So I'm glad you brought that up. You said that, I want to go back to, you said that you had anger management classes. Where did the anger come in at? Was it just kind of one of the symptoms of having post-traumatic stress?
No, I think it came from the Army, from the intensity level that we had to focus on. Like I said, I worked in chow hall, and so there's 30 minutes prior to the meal is when the intensity ramps up, because everything has to hit that line and has to be ready 30 minutes prior, and everything has to be right. There can't be any mistakes. There can't be something late hitting the line or anything, because you don't want to be late opening chow hall. And then you have the pressure of 15 to 20 cooks that are under you to make sure that they're doing their job, and you have to make sure that everything's going well with them. And in an Army chow hall and in the Army itself, yelling at people is an accepted behavior, because it just is. We can yell at people all day long, and most of the time, and we have the difference between civilian and military is we have the authority to back it up. In the civilian world, we don't, So when I started working in civilian kitchens, I would still do the same behavior, yelling at people. And so finally, one of my bosses came to me and said, "Hey man, you're a great worker. You work really hard. Your Army experience pays off really well here because you work harder than anybody else. You do excellent work because you are very detail oriented. You make sure everything is down to the ingredients. You're not trying to fill little personal touch on my recipe or something like that, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And but he said, you got to quit yelling, man. He said it's just not going to work. So
Mm-hmm.
I went to a therapist, and 10 minutes into the conversation, she goes, "You got an anger management problem." I was going, "Wow, that was quick." You know, I
Mm-hmm.
didn't expect to get diagnosed that quick, but I guess the yelling was the kind of tipping the scale. And so she said, we can get it under control. So it took me about a year of therapy to get my anger management under control. And then it was a domino effect. Then my high expectations, I had to bring them down because they were way up here in the Army level and they were never going to be met. It wasn't going to happen, you know, because the Army is here and civilian life is here, you know,
Mm-hmm.
civilian kitchen, you're just not going to get it, you know. So I worked on my expectations, and then I worked on my emotions being tied to my expectations, which was driving it. So that was kind of, now that I look back, that was really the changing of me that caused me to realize that there are a lot of people like me that get out of the Army that can't survive in the civilian world because it's just so totally foreign to us. And that's another reason why I do peer support, is to help them transition. You know, I worked with an Air Force guy here in Fort Worth, and he said, I'm scared to death of the civilian world, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And that's probably, if you probably ask 90% of the people coming off active duty, you would probably get that response because it's just so foreign.
Yeah.
Everything we do is so completely outside of the mindset of a civilian worker, civilian anybody, you know, and it's just so hard for them to understand how we can't leave the Army one day, go in the civilian job the next day, in fact, one that's the same, working in the kitchen, and be okay with it.
Right.
And I said, if I fired 5 of y'all and hired one more of me, we'd get this done.
Yeah.
You know, it wouldn't be any problems. But I obviously not going to happen. But I'm just giving you an example. That's just how we would work. So you know, so going, like I said, the struggles I've been through. Now I can know what it is, and I can say, okay, yeah. And somebody will say, hey, I've been having trouble with this, and we'll start talking, and then it eventually goes, yeah, that's exactly how I feel, you
Mm-hmm.
know, and that's why I'm writing a book now
Yay.
addressing those issues, because I want people to know that, hey, it's normal to go to work and watch everybody else drinking coffee while you're over there busting your butt, because that's what they do, you
Mm-hmm.
know, and nobody's going to tell them any different. All it's going to do is just frustrate you and drive your blood pressure up and cause you to really get upset at people when it's completely out of your control. You know, and it took me another 2 years to let go of trying to control other people. You know, I couldn't do it. I had to let that go. I had to finally get down to me, myself in the kitchen, nobody else. Don't worry about what Joe Schmo's doing over there. You worry about what you got to do. If the chef comes over and say, "Hey, go help Joe Schmo," then I'll go help him. But
Mm-hmm.
don't try to let people's other people drive your emotions.
Right. I One thing that you said that I have never, just because I haven't taken anger management classes, like clearly you've learned this strategy through that. And so I love that you enlightened us on like you had to learn to adjust and lower your expectations. That's interesting to think about because like for myself, um, my husband yells a lot and he doesn't see it as yelling. It's something we're working on, he's working on. And when I think about like why is it that he yells so much? Like, is it because the environment's overstimulating? Like, what is it? And right there, when you say like, you need to lower your expectations, that kind of makes things more clear for me, because like when he's like, hey, you know, like hollering at the kids for certain things, it's like in my skin, I'm crawling like, oh my God, stop yelling. Really? You're yelling about that? And so it really does come down to it. Like maybe we don't need to not expect these things and then in the end, like just yell about it. That's interesting advice, to be able to identify that you need to lower and adjust your expectations. I like that. One time I heard, not dealing with anger management, but I read somewhere like, first thing you need to do is lower your expectations. And then it said, I think it was talking about parenting. It was an article on parenting, and like, I think I was a new mom and just getting stressed out over stuff. And I read this article and it was saying like, you need to lower your expectations. And then it said, and then you need to lower them again. And that always stuck with me. I was like, oh, okay. All right. That'll help me not put so much pressure on myself. So you're writing a book. That's fantastic. Like, so you said you're talking about the anger management and like the different things with that. Very cool. Very cool. Do you know when we should expect to see that?
It's in the second reversion, and I'm hoping that's going to be the last one. It's only like 50 pages long, but it's just condensed down to just talk about adjusting to your family life, because especially if you've been deployed, about how you're coming back and you're finally staying home. You don't have any other responsibilities other than your job. And so now your family needs to become more of a priority. And then I talk about you yourself, how you can integrate with other veteran groups, and then I talk about purpose. Purpose is a huge one for veterans, because we've had a purpose of being a soldier or sailor or whatever, of trying to find a purpose. And then I talk about mental health. I have a chapter in there on mental health, because I want that to really be the standout chapter, because it's really the basis of writing it, because I feel like it is so under talked about, especially, like I said, in the Army, I know back in the early 90s, before it really became a big issue, I even did it, used to make jokes about mental health and about being crazy and everything, but it's just so much difficult, to have a conversation with somebody. And that's why when I'm talking to a veteran, first thing I'm addressing is his mental health. I need to know where he's at. Mm-hmm. I need to know if he's in complete denial, nothing wrong with me, I'm fine, or if he's seeing a therapist, or if he's on the other side and everything's going to shit in hell in a handbasket, and he don't know what to do. I need to fill that out, and it's difficult through a Facebook conversation, but eventually I can get that, and so I think by midsummer we should be having it in print.
Awesome. What's the name of it?
It's Help the Veteran Standing in Front of You. Oh,
perfect.
Well, the reason I had that thought back in December of 19, and it took me like 6 months to really develop into what I want. But it's about helping a person right next to you, not trying to look at the broad, up in the air big picture, because those big pictures won't ever work. It's just I have respect for all the big organizations, but when I can get on Facebook or wherever and I connect with a veteran and we have a conversation, then I'm good, because I know that is where the need is the greatest. It's just being able to walk up to somebody, at a club or whatever, and just say, hey man, how you doing? Since the way I last talked, how things going. It's just reaching that one veteran, not trying to reach 1,000 of them, just reaching that one and then move on to the next one, you know, and being there, you know, the consistency. Once I tell a veteran I am there for you, then I will not go away anytime. Now, if the veteran tells me I don't need your help, cool, I'm good. But you still have my contact. So if one day it takes a tank dive and you need to talk, I'll be here, you know. And I've had that. You know, I waited 6 months on the veteran. He finally came back to me. He said, okay, man. All right, let's talk. And that's the thing you have to learn in peer support. You have to let them be the one that's ready. You know, you may think, you know, that he's ready, but he's not ready. He or she's not ready until they come to you and say, okay, man, all right, so tell me what's going on. Tell me what I need to do. And I'm not going to tell you what you need to do. I'm just going to talk. I'm just going to listen. I'm just going to listen, no judgment, and it's a safe zone. You know, I say that to everybody in the first conversation because I want them to know that I'm not going to use these words that people's used on me. Oh, it's all in your head. Get over it. You're such a big wuss. You know, what are you doing? You're a soldier in the United States Army. You know, oh man, get over it, you know. And, you know, PTSD and depression and stuff never goes away. It gets better over time if you're recovering and you're healing from it, but it never goes away. And that's what people think, that they can go to a therapist for 10 sessions and say, hey, man, I'm good. I got everything under control. No, you probably just cracked the surface there. Yeah. You probably didn't really get into too much because, one, you're probably avoiding it. And two, it's just you're got that pattern on back. I went to therapy. I'm good. And it's sad that 70% of veterans that go to VA after their second visit don't come back because of the treatment. Because in VA, they're sitting there typing on the computer, asking a veteran question, never making eye contact, never really having that, you know, focus on the veteran, you know, because of the fact that they're check the block. They just want to make sure, hey, okay, you know, you're suicidal, you're homicidal, you know, they don't ask you like, I lost a good friend 2 weeks ago, you know, but I'm in a place mental health wise, I can handle that myself. But if I wasn't, I went to VA, I was, you know, they'd be like, oh, okay, what's going on? Oh, I lost a friend a couple weeks ago. Oh man, I'm sorry. What else? You know, and they just keep going. And Dr. Shauna Springer in her book, The Warrior, addresses that issue and says that she would love to be able to pull every VA site doctor into the room and say, look, you need to get personal. And of course, that's an extremely big choice, you know, because you know as well as I do, once you start getting personal with a veteran, then you got to be willing to go down the rabbit holes that veteran wants to go down.
Mm-hmm. I love your mission. I mean, I love it. I really hope, you know, I want to say this here only because I am happy that, I hate that I'm all over the place. Sorry, let me get it together. I hate that the VA has such a turnover in staff. And that makes me scared to think that I will lose the psychologist that I have now, or psychiatrist, but the counselor and the psychiatrist I have there now, like, I appreciate them. And like today I saw my psychiatrist and she's like in there cussing with me about some stuff that I'm going through. And she's like, that is effing trash. And I was like, yeah, I know. So like, I really hope I don't lose her, but I hope that around the United States that we're starting to get better at the VA. I hope that they're starting to really reflect on the fact that we do need to be listening more. And so that takes me back to what I had said about, I love your mission because one of the things that I just wrapped up after my first book, Calmed Growth After Trauma, I wanted to try and see how best I could help family and friends. And so through conversations before I decided to start a podcast, I was trying to figure out, well, what do I want to help them with? Well, I really want to best help veterans. And so I think supporting and equipping their families and friends with light enlightenment, understanding, and like the skills and strategies on opening up that conversation and listening, having those uncomfortable conversations. So I built a framework where my mission is to educate people on that framework, and everything you just said like is identical to it. Like, you don't sit there and tell them what they should do, you just listen, because in the end, like, people telling us what we should do, unless you want to do it and you've been able to identify that you need to do it, it's not going to do anything for you. So just listening. And so I hope all the people listening right now, anyone that knows like a veteran or a non-veteran that's struggling with something that you want to talk to them about, number one, get away from those comments like, get over it, what's wrong with you, you've been to therapy, blah blah. Don't even speak them. But number two, open your ears. And like Michael said, they may not be ready then, so just wait and wait. And you make it clear that you are there to listen when they are ready, because if and when they are ready, they'll know that you are a safe ear to talk to. So I love that you said that, because that's what people need to know. And that's what I really want people to take away from Celebrate the Struggle. I love that you're writing a book. I'm going to put that stuff, the title of it and your Facebook group in the show notes. And then when it does, I'll keep in touch with you. And when it does publish, I'll update the show notes to have the link to getting your book. So I have another question for you. You're clearly doing a really good job following like your passion to help veterans. And I love that it's clearly having such an impact, and it's only been a couple of years since COVID hit. So and I ask all my guests this because I really want to hear, and I want people to like dream big and just know the impact that you can have on people. If money and resources weren't an issue, what are your hopes and dreams? Like, if you could take your passion and make it bigger, 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 what would be some of your hopes and dreams?
Well, my first hope would be that all veterans, regardless if they're combat or not combat, would be able to get the help they need with their mental health. Not be shunned aside or kind of frosted over, and having somebody in their life, whether it be a peer support, a friend, a therapist, or whoever, that they know that they have one person that will not judge them and will not, call them names or whatever. They'll just listen, just kind of like a sounding board, because I feel like that, as veterans, we are not understood by the general population because we're just so different, and so just having somebody who can be there in their corner, with mental health. And like I said, no stigma and no anything, And then the second thing would be is more people will tell their story. Mm-hmm. Because by more people telling their story and sharing the hope and recovery and healing that they've gotten through their experiences and how they've grown and how they're a better person today because of the mental health issues that they had before, they've learned to live with them, learn to use them as teaching moments for people, for themselves, and learn that you can be whoever you want to be with mental health. You know, it's not a roadblock to
No.
anything, you know. And then finally, just being able to uh, have people just, you know, we hadn't talked about suicide much, but suicide, you know, is the second thing after mental health advocate for me is suicide prevention. You know, is being able to for people to be comfortable talking to another friend about suicide because we need to get to a point where we on the ground next to the person is the most comfortable person around that can ask that question, are you thinking about killing yourself today?
Mm-hmm.
You know, because a lot of times we'll beat around the bush. We'll say, are you thinking about hurting yourself or whatever? But when you put that shock question in there, are you thinking about killing yourself? It jolts that reality. And it's like, oh no, man, no, I'm not. I'm just having a hard time. But you ask the question because you need to make sure that that person is okay. You know, because if we don't ask that question and then something happens, and first of all, let me preface this: it's not your fault if that person commits suicide. Okay, even if you do ask the question, you still don't know. Okay, so people try to take on some guilt because, oh man, I knew him. I should have seen it coming. You don't know. You can't. Even you can read a mind. You still couldn't do it. You know, it's just one of those things that you have to accept as that's what that person was going to do. You know, and but I wanna that I feel like that's the second thing after the stigma with mental health is the stigma with suicide because a lot of people will tiptoe around and kind of go, "You okay? Is there anything I can do?" You need to just come straight out and say, "Or," and the myth is, if I ask him about suicide, he'll commit suicide. No, he won't.
Yes, that is
You
a
know,
myth. And honestly, like I didn't become enlightened about suicide prevention really until the last 4 to 5 years, and that is totally like I feel like I fell into the stigmas that's put out there in the society of like oh gosh, if I tell them like are you if I start talking to them about it and they think that I think they're going to kill themselves, then oh gosh, is that going to be a trigger? And so I've definitely learned that that is not the case. I'm glad you brought it up because as we got wrapped up in our conversation, I forgot that you had mentioned that you are also an advocate for suicide prevention. I actually thought about suicide earlier in the conversation when you mentioned that your uh, group and your book is called Help the Veteran Standing in Front of You. And you were talking about how, like, all these big groups, you know, help thousands, you know, whether that's monetarily or going to Congress, whatever. But I was thinking when you said that out loud, uh, recently I read, I think it was the motto of a suicide prevention non for profit, and it said, one at a time, one until 22 is done. And that reminded me of it. Like talking to one person at a time is going to tap into that 22 far more than like, you know, the funding of something that completely unrelated to mental health. And so I'm glad that you brought that up. There was something else. Oh, another thing I was going to say was, which I happen to have the shirt on under the sweatshirt today, uh, through the Wounded Warrior Project, which I tapped into over the last since COVID hit. I tried to start doing some of the virtual events, and I really have been happy. I know there's a lot of different feelings about, you know, different non-for-profits and that one and its reputation and things, but from my experience of these events that I have attended over the last couple of years, I have benefited from it, talking on Zoom with other veterans, and it might be a painting class, and they sent me the paints and the canvases and the paintbrushes, or it was a book. An author came on, so they sent the books out. We all read them and got on. So, but one of them was the Overwatch Project and yeah, you see you nodding your head. The Overwatch Project, listeners, for those of you that don't know what that is, it is another non-for-profit that is working toward bringing that 22 down and having more suicide awareness and prevention. And their motto is just fucking ask. And excuse my French there, but that's what it is. And they really advocate toward asking, and then for firearm owners, like just having a plan in place and not like being like, oh, you have depression, you can't have a gun, or taking their guns away. Like having a plan, like, hey, I know you're going through a rough time right now, like can I house your guns for a while? Can I take the key? Like whatever. So just ask and have those conversations with people. But more importantly, like Michael said earlier, listen, 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 and be present as you listen. Like, don't be trying to problem solve. Don't be trying to throw in your 2 cents or your stigmas or anything like that. So very good advice. I'm glad you put it into a book. And when you said like it's only 50 pages, like I feel like that's ideal. No one needs a 200-page book to read about anger management and like mental health. Like especially if they're struggling, and they're not going to want 200 pages of this breakdown, just like simple to the point and beneficial. So congratulations on that. I hope this last revision is the last one. I know how that goes. You get to a point where you're just like, I'm over this book, I want to burn it, I do not want to read it again. So I hope that it's your last revision. And I love your hopes and dreams, because again, they're just so selfless. Like you're doing very well with your own self-care, but I love that your mission and everything you're about is the selfless service to give back to veterans. So thank you for joining us today, Michael. Thank you for your service to our country. And thank you for continuing to serve your veterans. Clearly, your service is not over, and it won't come to an end, I would say forever, because the impact that you are having now will just have ripple effects for a lifetime. So thank you for joining us. I will be in touch, and we look forward to updating the show notes with the link to your book.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you so much for having me today. Like I said, the more I can share across the different platforms, and just reach, like I said, just reach one person. That's all I need to do, because if something you said or I said today helps that one person, then that's all we need to do,
Absolutely.
and then we just move on from that. But thank you for having me.
Thank you. I will be in touch.
Okay.
Okay, listeners, thank you so much for joining us today. Be sure to subscribe on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and wherever else you listen to your podcasts. And I will see you next time on Celebrate the Struggle.